Good evening, everyone. I would like to welcome the members of council, staff, and members of the public to discuss the proposed water and sewer rates for 2025 and call this meeting to order. This open meeting is a public information session held for the purpose of public engagement on certain topics with the public, council, and staff. During a public information session, no member discusses or otherwise deals with any matter in any way that materially advances the business or decision-making of the council. At this time, I'd like to ask Mrs. Pearson for the Indigenous land acknowledgement, please.
Thank you. We acknowledge this land on which we are gathered today is part of the ancestral land of the Chippewa, the Ottawa, and the Potawatomi peoples, referred to collectively as the Anishinaabe. The town of Petrolia is located on the lands associated with the Huron Tract Treaty number 29 of 1827. We express gratitude for the land where we live, work, and play, and we are committed to working respectfully with the land and the Indigenous peoples who have called this land home.
Thank you, Mrs. Pearson. Now, the purpose of the meeting is to afford the public an opportunity to receive information relating to the 2025 water and sewer rates and provide input to town staff and council. This meeting is specific to 2025 water and sewer rates. Any unrelated comments shall not be brought forward at this meeting. Public wishing to address council on another topic are most welcome, and this can be completed through the clerk's office for inclusion with the next council meeting agenda. At this time, I'd like to introduce the council members present. To your right, my left, is Councillor Hyatt, Councillor O'Hara, Councillor Welsh, Councillor Clark, and I'm Brad Loosely, Mayor. And I'd like to ask Mrs. Pearson to introduce the staff present, please.
Thank you. And so counterclockwise is Mike Thompson, our Director of Operations, Julie Bullock, our Director of Parks, Recreation, and Facilities, Annette Strand, our Manager of Finance and Deputy Treasurer, Larissa Ellsworth, our Director of Marketing, Arts, and Communications, Jess Smith, our Manager of Legislative Services and our Deputy Clerk, our CAO Treasurer, Rick Charlebois, and I'm your Clerk, Mandy Pearson.
Thank you, Mrs. Pearson. So at this time, we have a project presentation regarding this, and I'd like to call upon Mr. Rick Charlebois, our CAO Treasurer, for his presentation, please.
Okay. Thank you, Your Worship. Can we have the first or second slide up, please? Next slide, please. Okay, just a bit of background to start off with. So in May of 2000, I'm sure many of you recall, there was a major water tragedy in Walkerton, Ontario. 6 people died and over 2,000 people were sick. Some of them actually very sick. And since then, municipal water and sewer systems each operate as a separate activity financially, isolated from the other activities of a town. So water covers water and sewer covers sewer. Council members, senior staff, we must also take safe drinking water training at the start of each term of council. These are a bunch of the rules and legislation that the province brought in after the Walkerton situation. Both water and sewer operate at a break-even point or a full cost recovery, no profits. It is difficult to forecast water revenues and hence sewer because our sewer is based on the water in, we assume water out for sewer, as several factors impact consumption, such as the weather, whether we have a dry or a wet summer, water conservation, and town growth, and some other factors. The Consumer Price Index for 2023 was 3.9%. Just a bit of background. Next slide, please. These are our rates that went back to 2017. So 2017, we'd received a big grant for our sewer system for the new wastewater treatment plant, and we were able to actually reduce the rates for 3 years in a row there. And then in 2021 was the first sort of full year of COVID for us, and council decided to go with a zero rate increase for 2021. And then it goes to 2024. And then for 2025, so staff are recommending 2.5% increase for water and a 3% increase for sewer. And for several years now, for both water, sewer, and for our property taxes, we've been presenting a target rate for the next 2 years out. So 3.3 for water and a 3.5 for sewer. The staff will include the 2025 water and sewer rates in our draft 2025 municipal fee schedule. That's where we'll seek council's approval. The proposed water sewer rate changes are based on our current long-term planning assumptions. And should some of these assumptions change dramatically, staff would come back to council with any proposed rate changes. And I did a little bit of Googling on the weekend. Hamilton, there's been a lot of financial pressure on water and sewer, I'd say for at least the last 5 years or so. Hamilton, they're projecting a 10% annual increase for the next 9 years. Durham County for 2024 was 7.4%. Durham is Oshawa, Ajax, Pickering, and a couple of little places. London for the next from 2024 to 2027, it's between a 6 and a 9% per year that they're doing for water and sewer, adjusting to the pressures. And I think some of the big pressures, a lot of our water and sewer stuff, especially the underground stuff, was put in back in the 60s, 70s. So a lot of it's coming to the end of its useful life. So a lot of municipalities have to address that. Next slide, please. This slide here is actually the property taxes. It's for our budget meeting at the end of November, but it snuck in here. So we can skip to the next slide, please. This one here is our water rates from 2018 to 2023. So the black line is the cumulative consumer price index. So from 2018 to 2023, went up 21%, and our cumulative water rate increase from that same period is just shy of 14%. Next slide, please. Same slide, but for sewer. So the black line again, that's our cumulative, CPI rates, just over 21%. And for that same period, 2018 to 2023, it's actually negative 6.6%. And that's mainly due to the 3 years where we had decreases in our sewer rates. Next slide, please. Water rates. So our water treatment plant upgrade in 2022, we completed an $8 million capital project at the water treatment plant upgrade, and it's at in Brights Grove, and we got a $7 million grant for that $8 million capital enhancement. This project was to replace our clear well, which was about 120 years old, and some of the water pumps out there and a few other improvements to help secure the production of safe drinking water. This was a joint project with Inniskillen, Oil Springs, and Don Euphemia. They signed on to our grant application, which improved our chances of actually being successful. And those three municipalities, they feed off our water system, the water that the town of Petrolia produces. And then our water treatment plant intake, the big pipe out in the lake, looks like an ocean. Our town received a federal and provincial grant of almost $12 million to replace our water treatment plant intake over the next 3 to 4 years at an estimated cost of $16.2 million. And so far, that cost estimate is still accurate. This was also a joint grant submission with Inniskillen, Oil Springs, and Don Euphemia. Our intake, the actual intake we have now, it's the end of its useful life it's at the end of its useful life, which is 80 years, and it must be replaced. We just hope it hangs in there for another 2 to 3 years, I think, Mike, by the time we're totally done. and then we'll have a brand new intake. The plan right now is for the request for proposal for a contractor will be released in 2025. Start construction next spring, early summer. Next slide, please. So this is just some financial information about the intake. So 16.2 million is the estimated cost. Grant approval, the provincial and federal. So 5.4 for the provincial, 6.5 for the federal, for a total of 11.889 million for the total grants. And then the funding left over would be our share, the Town of Petrolia share, 4.3 million. The project, right now it's planned to be finished by October of 2026. However, some lingering COVID impacts may lead to an extension of that timeline, but we've just had a major meeting with our engineers and we think we can still meet that timeline. Next slide, please. Okay, so over the next 10 years, we've got 25.4 million of capital to be spent, and that's in our capital program, and that includes the intake, which is by far the largest project. Our planned funding sources, so 9.4 million from the water reserve to be self-funded over the next, what we have now and over the next 10 years. Grants, including the money we've got from the for the intake of almost 14 million, and then potentially debt for just over 2 million for total planned funding source of the 25.4 million to fund the capital. So the 4.3 million net Petrolia contribution, that's our share of the intake. We have been building up our water reserve. Starting in 2019, we had 530,000. As of the end of this past year, last time we had our audit completed, was 1.9 million to help fund the replacement of the intake. We do not anticipate any major changes to our operating cost over the next year, and do not anticipate any new debt in 2025. The planned land development and residential growth will help relieve some financial pressure on our water system. Next, please. Now we'll turn to sewer. And for the sewer, it's 10 million over a 10-year period. The planned funding sources, 6.4 million from sewer reserves, 1.7 million from grants, and 1.9 million in debt, for the total of funding sources of 10 million. We only have 133,000 in our sewer reserve at the end of 2023. Also, we anticipate a significant increase to our operating cost in 2025 for it's called the Consolidated Linear Infrastructure, which is a mandated provincial requirement. It's for sanitary and storm sewers. And council received an education session, is it 2 weeks ago, I think?
It's correct.
Yeah. Okay, we do not anticipate any new debt in 2025. And again, the planned residential growth will help relieve some financial pressure because as we get more residents, more water and sewer rate income. And I think council already knows about this. To remind them, we use about a third of our sewer capacity and about a third of our water capacity. So we have a fair bit of maybe not. There we go. So we have about a third of our water capacity and a third of our sewer capacity that we use right now. So we have lots of capacity for future growth. And this final, next slide, please. This final slide is for sewer and water. And as we talked about at the front end of the presentation, so for 2025, proposing 2.5% for water, 3% for sewer, and then looking outwards, the bank rate, as people saw last week, went down 0.5%. So the inflation's starting to come down. So we think we can meet those targets going forward. And this is all based on our current planning assumptions. If something drastically changed, say the bank rate shot up to whatever, or inflation went way up, we'd come back to council if we needed to make a quick change, or we'd wait till next year to incorporate any changes to our planning assumptions. And that's the end of my presentation. So I'm glad to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Charlebois, and maybe we'll do that at the end. I think the next thing I'll just go to is ask Mrs. Pearson, do we have anything in writing to bring forward regarding this presentation?
Thank you, Your Worship. No, we have nothing that's been received prior to the presentation.
Okay, thank you. So at this time, I'd like to open it up to the public. Anyone here wishing to address council regarding the sewer and water rates, or any questions you'd like to ask Mr. Charlebois at this time? Okay, please come forward. Please state your full name and address, please, for the record.
Barry Blackmore, 4005 Henderson Drive. Excuse me. Congratulations on a great report, I think, to whoever did it and the staff. It's a job well done, I believe, based on my experience. I have a question that wasn't addressed in the presentation, and that's regarding the monthly service charge, which council has stated previously that they realize that they have to raise it, which is completely understandable to me. My question is, it's currently $10.68 a month. Could you inform the public as to when you intend to raise it and what percentage you intend to raise it and for how long?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Blackmore. I'll ask Mr. Charlebois if he can address that, please.
Yeah, certainly. Yes, thank you for the question. Good question. I've looked at, I don't know, probably at least 20 or 30 different municipalities in some sort of detail. Every municipality is different between their fixed rate. Like for us, like you said, I think it is 1060, and that's just for the water part.
Yep.
Some will have a fixed portion for water, for sewer as well as water. We've only done that for the water rate, although it's something we've thought about but haven't really brought that to council yet. Because there's going to be winners and losers when you change a pricing model, and it's kind of awkward. One of the things we're thinking of is trying to ask council bringing in a consulting firm to give us an independent view of what they think our rates should be. Sarnia just went through that, I think, a year or two ago, and they're sort of the opposite to us. They have a really high fixed rate, monthly rate, but per cubic meter rate is quite low, where ours is almost the opposite to that. Yeah, there's advantages to both. Yeah.
If I could add, Mr. Charlebois, just so I'm clear, on the 3 and 3.5, or the 2.5 and 3% we're doing this year, would we not just increase that automatically?
Yeah, the fixed rate will go up by the same rate for the water. Yeah, exactly.
Sorry.
Yes.
Go ahead, Mr. Blackmore.
So does that answer my question? It's going up 3.5%?
2.5. The water. Yeah, the water.
Only 2.
Yeah.
And that's for the fixed rate?
That's the fixed rate. Yes, that's the only fixed rate we have.
Good thing I asked the question. Now I got an answer.
Yeah.
So it's only going up 2.5%.
Yeah.
Which is great, because I know 20 years ago it was over $7, and to be at 10 now, I think is admirable.
Oh, yeah.
I have a second part to my question. Will you be negotiating that rate also with the township, who is our largest consumer?
Again, please address the chair. Mr. Charlebois, would you speak to that, please?
Certainly, through your worship. Yeah, we've got, I think it's a 30-year agreement with them that we signed about 8 years ago. And in there's a built-in annual inflation. So between the two councils decided on a rate. I forget what it was 8 years ago. And then that rate gets inflated every year based on the Ontario Consumer Price Index. And then, so that gets inflated. We sell all our water. Our bulk water agreement is with Enniskillen. Then Enniskillen turns around and sells to Oil Springs and Donufemia. So that's how that works. So it's probably got another 22 years left on that.
Really?
Agreement.
Wow.
If I could add to that too, just the interesting part is the CPI was higher than what our rate to the local municipality was.
I read that.
Yeah.
Final part to my question, I hope, is will the rate increase for the service charge be coming out of the reserves that you already have? Or will it be part of a tax increase?
I'm not sure I'm clear. Mr. Charlebois,
That's right.
can you clarify?
Yeah, through your worship.
Yeah.
Can you just explain that? I'm not quite sure I follow.
The 2.5% increase that will be also tied to the monthly service charge.
Yeah, the monthly.
Will that
fixed rate.
2.5% be raised through taxation? Or will it be withdrawn from the existing water reserves?
Yeah, right. The
Go ahead, Mr.
water
Carl.
and sewer, they each pay for themselves.
Yep.
So the 2.5%, so that 2.5% will be applied to the current variable rate for water and the variable rate for sewer. And then the fixed portion for water, it'll go up by 2.5%. So when people pay water next January, the variable rate goes up and that fixed portion goes up.
I understand that,
Yeah.
but unfortunately, that doesn't answer my question.
Okay.
No, I think I can help.
Yeah.
It doesn't, no, it's not a direct cost to the taxpayer. It comes out of the water rates, and correct me if I'm wrong,
Oh,
Mr.
no,
Charlebois.
exactly, yeah.
So there's not an additional tax to the people.
But the only way you can get the money is through the taxpayer. The people that live.
Oh,
in
yeah,
Petrolia.
through the use of water, yes.
As a taxpayer in Petrolia, the 2.5% associated with the monthly charge is going to be added onto my
Water bill.
Yeah.
water bill.
Right.
Correct.
So actually, that was the second last part of my.
Okay.
Yeah, we currently have quite a bit of money in our reserves, as you mentioned. So my question to the council would be, I don't know, 2.5%, I'm quite surprised. That's pretty low, I think. Why would you not take that money out of the reserves? Because you just recently had an influx of $200,000 into the water reserve that wasn't used for the reconstruction of Valentina Street. And I've already paid taxes on that money.
I'll let Mr. Charlebois speak to that, but I do know we've got that major project that we're going to need some of those reserves to pay for that new water line going out into the lake. But I'll ask Mr. Charlebois to add to that, please.
Yes, through your worship, that's exactly it. Is we're trying to, if the world was perfect, we won't need to borrow any money to do this big project for the new intake. So we don't tie us up for whatever, 25, 30 years. That's the objective. We might make it, hopefully we make it, to build up enough of a reserve in water that water doesn't need to borrow any money. That's the logic of it.
I understand that's the long-term plan.
Yeah.
But that still boils down to the money coming from the residents of Petrolia.
For the,
Not
yes, for the
from
water.
The money that the residents of Petrolia have already paid. I'm saying, and you answered the question when you gave your presentation, after Walkerton, the Ontario provincial legislation states that any money that was put in for
Yeah.
water, excuse me,
Yeah.
must be used for water.
And
So
it will.
you were willing to take it out of that project and put it in reserves. My question is, why can't you reverse that process and give it back to we, the taxpayer?
Yeah.
Mr. Charlebois, go ahead. I
Yeah,
think
we
with the
have-
sewers, we've probably done that, but go ahead, Mr.
Yeah,
Charlebois.
we have, yeah, we have three main, through your worship, we have three main reserves. So we have town, what we call town general, that's from the property taxes.
Mhm.
And then we have water, and then we have sewer. So the water reserve, none of that money ever gets used for the other two, ever gets used for any sewer stuff or cost. Same with anything that else to do with the town. They're each managed and accounted for separately.
I understand.
Yeah.
All right, could you just, I think you've answered all my questions, and thank
Okay.
you very much for that. Could just please consider my request to take it actually out of the reserve and not add it on as a line budget item for 2025 budget. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Blackmore, for coming to address council. Anyone else wishing to address council at this time? Okay, I'll ask one more time. Anyone wishing to address council regarding the water and sewer rates? And just before I close the session then, I will ask council, do you have any just questions or clarification to Mr. Charlebois at this time? Councillor Welsh.
I'm just wondering how much of the increase would you estimate is related to the consolidated linear infrastructure compliance that we will now be required to complete?
Mr. Charlebois, go ahead, please.
Yes, through your worship. We're still working to figure out how much that'll cost for next year. The estimate is somewhere between 50,000 and maybe as high as 150,000 per year going forward. It's a major endeavor, as mentioned at our education session.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hyatt, go ahead.
Question, sorry, through you. Prior to us seeing the fee schedule for 2025, will we get an updated status of Q3 results from a fiscal performance?
It's a good question. Mr. Charlebois, would you like to address that?
Certainly. I don't want to put our deputy treasurer on the spot, but I think we're aiming for the 12th of November to bring that, our Q3, which is the end of September. I know Annette's busy trying to get that updated with all her other tasks. So we're hoping to make it to the 12th of November. Is that still the target?
Yes, that's
Oh,
correct.
okay, thanks.
And then for council's information, that'll give it to us prior to our budget session, the end of
Right.
November.
Fee schedule is supposed to come what day?
I think are we aiming for the 12th for that as well? Ash, we could maybe look at trying.
So that'll be our next council meeting.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Any other questions or clarification to Mr. Charlebois from council? If not, hearing none, I'll declare this meeting officially closed. Thank you, everyone.